Most people are very shocked when suddenly there is a blackout. I think that's the thing which people underestimate. It's that the whole system is very vulnerable.
That is Bradley Mundt, CEO of Plan B Net Zero. He believes that most people only think about energy when something breaks, but the real issue is how easy it is to take stability for granted.
I think what people underestimate is how complex it is to sustain what they have. People are used to what they have, in the sense they're used to having the electricity, they're used to having running water and everything.
By the end of this conversation, you will learn why resilience, preparation, and self-sufficiency matter more than most people realize. I'm Peter Pongracz, and this is Soliverse, the future of solar. Renewable energy and lifestyle. It's not exactly the match made in heaven, right? So why do you guys focus on these particular aspects of the industry?
This is something we are very, very proud of, I would say. It probably has one of the biggest potentials out of any industry. I'll give you a straight up example. Banking has done the exact same thing. So banks used to be just banks with, having their stores or whatsoever, where people could walk in, whether it was just to, get money or to talk to some type of manager or to have something being done. Banks went to online banking. They had like an evolution in a sense, which online banking, at least for me, being someone born in 2000, when I was 18, online banking was a thing. It was still fairly new. You had like a 50-50 thing where some people said, oh, it's not good. And they never really had good reasons. And the other side said, great, go for it. It's much easier. And that went a step further, and they revolutionized it by getting a lifestyle aspect in. So then you started having banks which were only online banks, for example, N26 here in Germany, or Revolut, which is more international. And they started implementing so many more features in their apps, where they said, okay, we can actually make a lifestyle thing out of this, because people can have more reasons to get into the app and check how to spend their money in smarter ways with insurances and so on. Now comes the thing to us. We see it the same way. The difference is that we can theoretically do it better. Why? And I don't mean us as Plan B Net Zero. I mean us as like the energy industry. Why? Because every person tends to have more than one bank account. I know some people that have a dozen. And that means that you split your money. Yeah. Or let's say at least your actions. So something maybe to manage something, the other one may be for assets, the other one may really just be for savings and so on. Which means the banks don't communicate between one another, and so they don't know. So theoretically, I could be, let's say, a millionaire on one account and have no action on the other one. Yet they won't know of the opposite side. In our case, every household only has one electricity provider or supplier. And that's it, which means now as a household, I have a full family in general. I tend to have, let's say, classic image now, the parents, mother, father, and let's say 2-3 children. And these all are in one household. Now, this whole household is what I see. And so now, of course, I have more data to work with. I have more information. Why? Because already when you choose your electricity supplier, you go, let's say, to a comparison site, and you already give base info, which is, for example, where do you live? And where do you live is not just the city, but the specific area within the city, which means I more or less already judge whether you are, let's say, in a wealthy area in, more the center of town, or whether you're somewhere which is maybe outside, like rural areas, and so on, up to the point of also going further to how much you spend per month, per year, how much your electricity usage is, and so on. And here's the point where we have more information, because according to this, I will know what kind of income level you more or less have. I will know maybe what your lifestyle might be, because I can already know whether you have a house or an apartment, of what size, in what area. And now comes the crazy part, to not have this be answered too big. But again, it is a very interesting point to base a lot of things on, is the fact that if you look at the smart meters today, which read the electricity, the smart meters can read the electricity so accurately that I can tell you what technology you have at home. I can read it so accurately, theoretically, like actively not, but the smart meter does, that when you watch something on your TV, I can even tell you what you're watching. And that is the crazy part, which means putting everything together, I can more or less judge when you go on holiday, whether you have an EV at home or whether you have, a modern TV, whether you use it, whether you use speakers, when you wash your things, and so on. This is nothing I actively look into. But if you have AIs and everything, the information, the data is there. And this is why we say, in theory, we're in a better position to combine lifestyle to electricity or energy than banking is and many other industries.
Wow, so that's quite a lot of points to dig a little bit deeper into. So you mentioned a couple of things, like you can determine my lifestyle, which is super important and also interesting, I guess, both for advertisers or whoever the case might be who's running a business that could be tied into this whole ecosystem. But so I assume there is a massive data layer in the picture as well. How does that tie in, and how is that connected to the whole operation of Plan B?
It does not really tie in. That's the interesting part. What I just explained is very theoretical, which is truly the fact that if you look at the structure of a grid of electricity, it's very complex. And I'll keep it basic just because it's not necessary to go into the details. But if you look at the physical grid in a country of where the electricity runs through and the wires and everything, of course, between us being a supplier and the grid, we have a couple more steps. And let's say you have the actual provider, the grid operators, which will be doing the let's say, physical aspect of actually rewiring you for your supplier, if you change your supplier. And they are the ones which actually get that data. So these are the ones which have the service where this data goes through. And then these numbers are being sent to us. So we actually, as Plan B Net Zero, never touch this information. We don't even have the ability to. What you can do, though, theoretically, is two things. Either you actually, under very, very strict circumstances, have some type of allowance to go to your provider and actually work with the data. Again, not actively, so it's nothing which I can pull onto my servers here or onto my laptop or something, but it's something I can get an insight into within AI. Or even better, and that's the easier way, you just do it through an app and you have your customers say, yes, I allow Plan B Net Zero through the internet to access to my usage, like the electricity usage. And that's how then we can work on it.
Wow, very cool. And what's the benefit to the customer? So let's say I am your customer or potential customer. How do I benefit from this whole operation?
The benefit here is that if, let's say now in my app, I would have, let's say, different levels of subscriptions, or even generally, I would just give you a portfolio of, let's say, 100 partners, which we work with. And these partners, I'm talking about anything you can buy. Okay. So I would say it's IKEA, it's Nike, it's, let's say, Samsung, KitchenAid, anything from clothing to tech to household to even travel, whatever, like booking things and so on, whatever you want. Now, the thing is that not only I will have them in the app, so you can always have a look to a small discount. Yeah. Let's say 5%, 10%, something like that, or payback, cashback, that's that type of thing. Instead of you having a look at these 100 partners, 150 partners every month, because they do renew it themselves, I will tell you, I know who you are, so let me give you your top 10 most relevant ones. Do you understand? And now you always know, oh, okay, let me have a look, because Plan B Net Zero already, in a way, like configured that portfolio for me. And that's it. And so I increase the likelihood of making you have advantages in your life, whether it's by spending money or having the right insurance or whatever comes around these type of things. That's what I would want to give you.
So you are giving me a curated offer based on my behavior. And if we dig into the beginning of the equation, so you guys don't just sell kilowatts, but you sell, resilience and energy security as well to a certain extent. How is that part covered in Plan B Net Zero?
That's a bit different, because I would say if you talk about resilience based on transparency, control, and mostly, I guess, having the option, like general options, that means that electricity suppliers used to be something which is very dry, something which you don't really want to work with. And the newer generation, especially online, brings a new standard. And this new standard is, to be fair, to have full transparency and control over what you buy. Yeah. And so this is, in a way, what I want to bring in. This is what we want to bring in, or what the plan is behind all of this. And so this is what I would say the resilience part is, that compared to many other suppliers still out there, some of the biggest even, they are not that transparent. They are not that fair. They still work with very old prices. So way too high prices per kilowatt and so on. Most people don't know, but the energy market has its own like stock market in a sense. Yeah, which is really going up. You can literally work with electricity, for example, and actually buy it at certain prices, and it goes up just like a normal stock, like in seconds, And so we, for example, update our price every single day, every day, to really keep it on the market price. We have other ones which have prices from 6 months ago, and I'm not exaggerating. And so we want to give the option to the people to not have to think about these things, to not have to think about the fact that they spend too much money, and to not have to think about the fact that they have a contract which maybe halfway scammed them. Have the option to say, okay, if I do spend less money per month, or let's say at least if it is green energy, because we only work with green electricity, to then, have a different mindset in life. It should be a psychological factor which we give the people, to say, okay, you can actually, leave the TV on. You can leave the lights on. Don't worry about, small things like that your electricity appliances are still connected to the sockets as you go for holiday. I know so many families here in Germany which really take out every single cable out of the supply when they go for holiday, including their fridges. These are small things which just sweeten life, in our opinion, where you just say, okay, give the people the power and the option, and that lifestyle to just be more relaxed, not have this be such a, go towards burden maybe.
So I guess it's a balance between, being also ecologically conscious and being mindful of, not having to basically deprive yourself of small luxury or comfort in your home. I think it's important to kind of find a balance between the two, right? You need to have the conveniences that you want, but also be able to make the right decision at the same time as a consumer. And I think that's the biggest challenge today.
I think that's everything in every industry. That's the new thing. It's a new standard. I think it's become very tough, especially for the ones which do not come from this generation, or which do not have a good understanding over this generation now. I think a lot is switching and becoming very difficult for businesses which have like the older mindset.
That's true, and you can't even blame them, because if we as people, we are risk averse by nature, right? We don't really want to go and try the newest thing immediately. We want to wait for a couple of people to try it, test it, and then if it works, then we might be in as well. But that will take some time to change as well. But what I wanted to dig a little bit deeper into is also a distributed generation, right? So today, with the age of AI, it's quite important for us to be also not just consumers, but producers as well. And the more we can distribute this production, the easier it will be both for the grid and the entire country or the local area to operate in an energy system, right? For example, if company A puts a data center in your neighborhood and they are actually outbidding you from the energy price, then you might have an issue as well that, okay, you either need to pay premium to actually get access to energy, or you will better off producing your own energy, and then you're fully in control, right?
Yeah, definitely. I think that's where things get a bit more complicated, because let's say that's very technical. But on top of that, it's also where you differentiate between the countries. Because in the US, it's a bit different or a bit difficult to see. You would have to see in what state it is. Because I think in the US, it's more or less well balanced, like 50-50 between the regulated and liberal like states or markets when it comes to energy. And so things work a bit differently because, of course, countries try to not have these type of things.
I mean, in Europe, we are a little bit more on the safer side because we are, more regulated, and that's probably one of the only times when regulation is actually a plus for most people. From your perspective, like when energy systems fail, where do the households or businesses feel it first? Is it their comfort? Is it their safety? Is it their wallet?
I would say it's a psychological thing. It is something which, when you look at normal households, normal families, all the way up to businesses, in the end, psychologically, it becomes a lot of stress. It can cause a lot of problems because you're talking about unpredictability. It's the financial aspect. It's very difficult. But I think psychologically, it's the main part where people start to rethink, about things which they fundamentally actually did not have in mind. Where suddenly they see problems which they didn't have in mind. For example, stability, general stability in life or in business or whatsoever.
We have had a couple of examples in the recent couple of months or years, when the grid goes down and people are acting shocked and sometimes they panic as well. What do you think needs to happen to kind of mitigate these reactions, or how can people hedge themselves against these type of situations? For example, the blackout in Spain last year or in Portugal, etc.
Mitigate is what makes it complicated. If you would say, if we would talk about preventing it, you would say, okay, we're talking about, autonomy, self-sufficiency. That's it. It's not really easy to actually build up, but that would be the concept. At the end of the day, it's especially preparation. It's proper preparation in different aspects where you have the people ready, where you have, let's say, a set amount of steps or a certain protocol which you go through to really know, okay, what happens step by step? What are we going through? How do we keep everything more or less in control? In my opinion, the best thing you can do is just autonomy, especially with the wars going on and more or less emerging in every corner now. There's no scarcity. I think things are in a green area. As soon as it gets into scarcity, that's where the problem comes. And we've experienced it, especially when it came to the Ukraine war. But I think that was more or less the wake-up call. And that's where my belief, especially Europe as itself, should become more self-sufficient.
Yeah, indeed. And I mean, we are recording this on the 3rd of March 2026, so we are into a second war in Iran. So it's sending shockwaves across the markets, the industries, and we still realize how heavily reliant we are on oil as well, which is something that we should really get as far away from as possible, as soon as possible. And in Europe, we are not the fastest to implement changes, but I think this is going to be a second catalyst after the Ukrainian war to help us push, to more renewables.
Definitely, the political aspect in Europe is very, very difficult. Implementing things here are not that easy or take time. But especially when it comes to renewables, the issue is that you have discrepancies between the countries, between neighboring countries, which make this a very, very, very difficult mission.
Yeah, it's a complex problem. But from your experience, what do most people underestimate when things are normal and when it comes to basically consuming energy normally versus times like this when you have huge shockwaves in the market?
I think what people underestimate is how complex it is to sustain what they have. People are used to what they have in the sense, they're used to having the electricity, they're used to having running water and everything. And most people are very shocked when suddenly there is a blackout. Smaller thing, which is very interesting, is like 8 weeks ago, more or less, in Berlin, there was a blackout like in a third of the city. It's very interesting because the number one thing I heard most was people being frustrated over the fact that there was no internet anymore. And so that really, to me, blows my mind. And I think that's the thing which people underestimate. It's that the whole system is very vulnerable. You don't know what can happen. Sometimes truly it's just a technical part which can blow up or whatsoever, and it just suddenly doesn't work. Or sometimes it can be a cyber attack. It's feasible, but I think people underestimate the stability and especially what it causes for them. And they're just not used to these things.
Yeah, for sure. And from your experience, what separates the people who are calm and collected in these situations versus the ones who panic when they don't have Wi-Fi? Are they psychologically more resilient? Are they more prepared? What is the difference between the two profiles?
That's the thing. The main thing is that some of them, or a lot of them, I think nowadays are mentally prepared, and because they are mentally prepared, they also physically are prepared. So a lot of them already have the tech or implement something, whether they have a whole different way of thinking of all of these things. I think economically, a lot has changed. Like businesses have changed a lot of their structures to just be more prepared for all types of things, especially politically, I would say, or at least in Europe.
Very true. And when you think about businesses or even households, looking into the future, and when they are making investment decisions about their autonomy, their solar modules, their battery backups, what information do you think they should have before making these decisions, and what information they could live without?
I think what's important here is that people mostly don't overthink. I think there's nothing specific which people should know or not know. It's better for people to not overthink, because the issue is that, or the number one problem is adjacent to what you were just asking. And that's very interesting if you look at it statistically. It's a bit like in the medical sector, where it's like the amount of deaths you have in a country or something is and this is an extreme example, I'm sorry, but this really perfectly shows it. Statistically, the amount of the number one cause of death is misdiagnosis of something, of a disease or so, and not an actual disease. And that's super interesting because most countries have misdiagnosis as the number one cause. And so for us, it's more or less the same thing. People don't need to know about the technology. People don't need to know about the grid or about the political aspect, about an economical aspect, about a social aspect. They don't need this. What most people do is that they overthink. And so they look at this so much that they forget to just do it. And so people wait for perfect timing. They wait for the point where the politicians will subsidize something, or let's say the region subsidizes something, where something might be, let's say, more attainable, because a lot of these technological things are very price intensive. They wait for the most modern technology to be out. And in the end, nothing happens. It's funny because that's what I mean with adjacent. In the end, it's more of a head thing, because they overthink the actual problem.
Yeah,
and so that's what I would tell people, to not overthink. And all that they do have to know is to just go for it. The technology is very, very, very good. It is very developed for many generations. And that's it. That's all that they have to keep in mind.
But I guess the kind of decision-making process between households and businesses are a little bit different, right? The households are basically mostly individuals or smaller groups of people, while businesses have a little bit more firepower, both financially and also in terms of analyzing and making a little bit more informed decision about the future turnaround and ROI as well. So what do you think about that?
That's something very difficult, because things are changing so quickly right now. The number one thing you can say when it comes to people wanting to plan, to businesses wanting to plan or restructure, the big issue we have right now, I would say, is the way that we saw the last 10, 20 years, like the last decade, compared to what's coming, is not going to be the same. Not at all. And it has never been this way. Again, we're coming back to AI and everything, but everything is changing so drastically fast and in ways which were really just not planned, that you cannot predict anything. You cannot know anything, honestly. And it's awful, but this is truly For me, even as owner of my company with huge plans and wanting to do so many things, and I want to influence as much as possible in a positive way, it is a super difficult thing. So I think here the key point is flexibility. Go for something, but stay flexible. And flexibility is so important that I would even say this is the one aspect to focus on, which will determine whether you survive the upcoming years or whether you quickly crash. You just said it. With the 3rd of March, Iran war is a major thing suddenly. And a week ago, it was nothing. It was non-existent. And here we are. The prices have spiked. People are rethinking about, things which work and don't work. 20% of the world and LNG comes from Iran, which suddenly fades away. I mean, the stock market's crashed. Everything is out of bound.
Yeah, I mean, this is the thing that the more we can, to some extent, I wouldn't use the word anticipate, but prepare for these type of worst case scenarios, the more stable we will be as a society or a country. And I think that that's quite important to think about. And on that note, do you guys have any sort of framework advice to people on how you guys think about, managing this flexibility or this fast-paced change within your company?
The best way or the best advice to manage these changes, I would say, is to consciously know that there's a risk and that there's volatility. Just keep it in mind for everybody, whether it's a student by themselves in an apartment or a huge business with 3,000 employees, whatever it is within that range. Have it conscious. If you have the means to become more self-sufficient, do so. It is smart. The technology is there. You don't have to go for the most expensive. Definitely not. A lot of it is branding and everything, typical, as we know. So just go for something good utility at home, because if you look at like good households nowadays or businesses, man, I've seen myself, some of them reaching, and I mean both businesses and households or private places, to have a self-sufficiency of around 80%, or at least up to 80%, which is amazing. I mean, this is crazy. This is the difference between there's a blackout and for 3 days, my battery storage system, if big enough, can still keep me going perfectly normally, Just have a certain ration of things, or keep in mind, like, stay calm and just say, okay, we have fresh food in the fridge. Let's take it out. Let's cook it today. Make sure that we go buy a couple of things for the next couple of days. It sounds awful, but it's the best thing you can do. As always, stay calm. As in any situation, have it consciously in mind so you're ready to act when the thing comes up, and that's it. That's it.
True. And on that note, what would be the energy mistake that you have made personally that you learned the most from?
As a business, the biggest mistake I have once done, and thankfully never again, is to look at long term, to plan something for the long term. And for the long term, I mean, as an electricity supplier, if you buy electricity off of the stock market at a certain price, to then, of course, supply it to your customers, at the end of the day, you're trading, or rather, you are buying and selling. Classic. If you go for the long term, it's risky to a point that that's what can make you crash. That once was a very narrow thing. And it's interesting because it wasn't even that long term. So long term in this industry would mean something like you take one price for the following 12 months or 24 months. In my case, I think I only planned for 3 months. But in 3 months, I don't even remember what happened, but something happened and it just went in a whole different direction. And the only thing which saved me was the fact that it was for 3 months, which I planned, and not further, because otherwise, it definitely would not have worked. I used to be a day trader before. I'm fortunate to be one of the ones which was successful at it, or fairly successful. In my opinion, it's either you're successful or nothing. I got humbled again here with that situation. As an individual person, I would say it's similar. It's the fact that I went for a dynamic tariff. Dynamic tariff means that as you use the electricity, you paid for that current price then in that moment on the market. That's something which, of course, if the market goes up, your price also goes up. That's something which becomes very expensive. That was a moment where I was one of these people which was overthinking, which was thinking like, okay, I had no autonomy, no self-sufficiency. And so that was a very expensive month.
What would be the parallels between being a day trader, running a company like Plan B Net Zero?
The parallels are thankfully barely there, very intense. And here I would say it's more relaxed out of that aspect. You have different problems in a different area. And it's also here a broader spectrum. But the one thing which definitely is always the same is emotions. If you can keep your emotions out of the things you do, you will for sure perform better. Because in day trading, you learn to actually lose all emotion. You just do it dry, as if it was pure theory, and you just look at your numbers as numbers, true, just black and white, as if you're still in maths class or whatsoever. That's the only thing which saves you from doing emotional mistakes, quick mistakes. And the same thing is here. No matter what it is, whether it's, again, the energy market, that's a more basic, constant thing which you can work with. So that's a bit easier. But starting from there, all the way to any deal you have or any further step, you have flexibility and adapting to the market. Everything you do, I would say the less emotion you have, the better it is.
How would you describe your company culture? How is that being implemented in Plan B?
My company culture, I would say, is amazing. I'm very proud about that. When it comes to like the old school way of working, it's something which I have very hard boundaries towards. So I'm someone which is very difficult to just keep in doing the same routine. I'm very difficult. I'm someone which pretty much it's impossible to keep in the same routine. It's impossible to, just put me in a box and keep me there for a certain amount of time every day. So a 9 to 5 is not my thing at all, just as an example. And so this is something which, from my own character, I definitely took into my company. So I am a fairly relaxed manager, and I appreciate the fact that I managed to implement it into my team. So we have a couple of rules, but the number one thing is that the respect is all the way throughout the team, which means no matter how high of a position you are, or on the opposite end, if you have feedback, if you have something to let's say criticize or to give up in a way where you don't feel like you've been talked to in a good way or good manner or fair or whatsoever, then we allow that. That's something which everyone gets to talk to everybody on one level, on a personal level. I'm very relaxed when it comes to the time. So as long as the work is done in a way, I don't really care whether you do 6 hours today and tomorrow, or whether you put everything in one go and, keep your day more relaxed tomorrow or off tomorrow, whatsoever. These are small things where I would say the company culture is something which we have internally between us, but especially which we give out to the customer. And this is why I'm very proud of it, because I know that my whole team, whether I be here today or not, that would keep this going. That would keep this culture going, and they would want to have the transparency, the fairness, all these small things from the beginning, which we're discussing, all the way through to the customer. They will still, make sure that this is the number one priority, the way that we live, the way that we think, and what we want to change.
Most successful companies actually, translate this corporate culture both inside and outside, right? So you communicate the same way to your internal stakeholders as to your customers, no matter who it is in the hierarchy. So it's quite important to harmonize that. As our time is coming to a close, for those people in the audience who might be interested in connecting, what's the best way to reach out either to yourself or the company?
planbnetzero.com. The best way I would say is LinkedIn. We're very active on LinkedIn, and we do communicate there and everything. So just look Bradley Mundt, and you'll not only find the company, but also my full team.
We will link to those in the show notes below. Bradley, thank you for your time. I appreciate you being here today. And as you mentioned, we'll do this again soon.
I appreciate it very much. Thank you for your time.